And I really began to kind of develop a true, authentic, genuine passion, not just for wine, but for Pinot Noir.
I'm here with Mark McWilliams, and Mark is the what is your role these days now? I mean, I'm a little gray.
I still think I'm just the lowly owner. I used to have more fun titles, but now it's just relegated to ownership.
Okay, yeah, and I want to get into that, but of course, the wine is Arista, and we are in Healdsburg, and this is where you are basing yourself. But this is not where you make your wine, obviously, because we're in an office.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So everything is in Healdsburg in terms of like an address. The winery itself is located out on West Side Road, about 10 minutes from where we're sitting, but kind of administrative offices just off the square.
Got to have offices.
Got to have them.
Can't do business without offices.
That's right.
Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. I know you have to travel, so we're going to get through everything, all 765 questions.
Easy.
Yeah.
I can do it. Thank you. And really, thanks for making time. I know that you've been on a busy trip, and so to include me on it, I really do sincerely appreciate it. So
I'm going to dive right away to your history in wine.
Sure.
I always like to ask people, did you have the one experience, the aha moment, or did you just kind of happen to be born with a bottle in your hand, or how'd that go?
Maybe I'll split the difference there. In a sense, I was born into this. I've had the kind of aha moment, but sequentially, it was a couple years into my wine career. I'd always been around wine. So maybe the first part of that question, I was born and raised in a small town in East Texas, not necessarily renowned for our wine growing, but I was born to parents who had traveled the world. My mother lived in France for many years.
Really?
My parents had spent a lot of time in Napa and Sonoma in the 80s and 90s. And so even growing up in a small town in Texas, wine and kind of extension of that, flavor, smells, cooking was something that was always big in my home. And so in that sense, I'd always been around it. When I was in junior high, my parents purchased land in Sonoma County and had a dream, I think a small dream, of planting a little vineyard. And 25 years from that point, that was in 1992, they would be ready to retire, have a vineyard to retire to. And that was honestly kind of the dream. And so as a young kid, we would spend summers or spring break, Christmas, whatever, out here. But, in that sense, as a youngster, teenager, it was fun to come here, but I wasn't into wine, and it wasn't, there was no like inspiration at 7. I knew I wanted to be a winemaker. It wasn't really until after college. We had vineyards. We were growing fruit for other people, didn't have the winery yet. I moved out here, got a job working for a few different wineries, first in the vineyard, and then on the production side, the winemaking side. And I really began to kind of develop a true, authentic, genuine passion, not just for wine, but for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And so it was a few years into my journey in wine that I finally kind of had an aha moment with a bottle of wine. And so it was a bottle of 1990 Max Ferdinand Richter Gracker Heimelreich Spätlese.
Wow.
And that would have probably been in 2005. Wine was about 15 years old. I was in Chicago with a buddy of mine who was a master somm now. At the time, he was kind of working his way up, but a guy named Fernando Bateta. And he'd taken me out to dinner. And he goes, "You should check out a Riesling." I'm like, Riesling, man, that's kind of like simple, sweet. What's the big deal about that? And he's, just try this. And at that point, I was about 15 years old and pulled a cork on it, and it absolutely blew my mind. I still have that bottle actually in my office, kind of my little wall of fame.
Yeah, that's great.
Some of the bottles I would say on that wall definitely are these iconic, gotta have them wines. But interesting, there's a couple on there that are not like the most, mountaintop in terms of scarcity, rarity. But they're these wines that have had for various reasons, kind of a profound impact on my wine journey. So,
being that your family had the property, by the way, how many acres was that?
Well, planted, it was about 40. It was a larger piece of land.
40 acres planted.
It was 40 acres planted.
Good-sized.
It was in the Alexander Valley. So, yeah, that part of the story. My parents had the chance to buy. Really, they wanted to be in Sonoma County. They'd spent a lot of time here. They knew they wanted to be here. I don't think they were as adamant that it had to be in the Russian River or the Alexander Valley. They wanted a piece of land here. And so kind of as the stars aligned, it was a piece of land in the Alexander Valley up in the mountains, kind of above the town of Cloverdale, that they were able to purchase and plant. It was 38 acres of Cabernet, 2 acres of Cabernet Franc.
Oh, my.
And it was just a stunning little vineyard up in the mountains. And we learned a lot about the business, met a lot of people that really ultimately kind of opened doors to the next chapter of the business, which kind of was, to not jump too far ahead, but for about 10 or 12 years, we grew fruit. That's what we did. As I moved out here and fell in love with the business and knew I wanted to be involved in the business, I'm one of 4. I'm the oldest of 4. Number 2 in the batting order, Ben, began to express interest as well. But as a family, we kind of began to look at what we had and realize, okay, the 40 acres was something that my parents could have in retirement. A little bit of residual income would be nice, but it was never going to support them fully. Yeah. It certainly wouldn't begin to support, next generation. And financially, we weren't in a position that we were going to be able to scale land. That just wasn't, our direction. But from a winemaking perspective, we began to realize, it's cheaper to buy a ton of grapes than it is another acre of land. And so we kind of started looking at the winemaking side of this as a family business and kind of how we could begin to grow. And so at that point in the story, this is probably in about the year 2000, 2001, I'm living in the Alexander Valley on my family's property, but my day job is in the Russian River Valley. I was working for a Pinot Noir producer and really beginning to kind of establish my relationships and like authentically who I was. And it was Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. It's where my passion was. And so we began to kind of drift that way as a family, that we had this great Cabernet vineyard, but the future was going to be Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Russian River Valley. It just time and perspective, you learn these things. When we first started off, we didn't come from 5 generations of winemaking. So we didn't have this like institutional, I didn't have a mentor that I grew up with. So it was kind of first gen stuff for me. And so, yeah, of course, there's this initial curiosity about wanting to grow the grapes and wanting to make the wine. And I did that. So we had an amazing consulting winemaker that worked with me for the first 10 years of our brand. She certainly gets the credit for kind of building that brand. But that was kind of me and her name was Leslie doing the winemaking. It became obvious to me, and I think you have, I don't care what your profession is, at some point you have to really introspect. If you want to be great and you really want to achieve at a high level, you got to be able to introspect. And it didn't take long for me to realize there's going to be more talented winemakers than me. There was no ego that I had to be the winemaker. And so as we got into the journey, it's still a passion and I'm still super involved in it. But I think for me as a business owner, I have to understand my strengths and weaknesses. And I had to understand that, I want to make the best wines that we possibly can. And me trying to do it was going to be an encumbrance. So, it was an easy transition to bring in, when my brother and I purchased the business from our parents in 2012, it necessitated some role changes. And I think that was one of the first big steps that we made in terms of truly elevating our wine to a very, very high level of quality, was to bring in a new winemaking team. So, I kind of get the best of both worlds. I get to still be involved in it. I get to be around it. I get to participate in it. But at the end of the day, we have one of the best Pinot and Chard winemaking teams in the New World making our wines. And so it's fun for me to get to try their wines and be proud of them to take them out to the market.
You are still the owner.
Yes.
But there's been a change in the company.
Yeah. So, I kind of think about the life of a business, especially family businesses. There's these chapters to them, evolutions that kind of naturally occur. So my parents, Al and Janice McWilliams, started Arista in 2002. My younger brother, Ben, and I went to work for our family and have worked basically as adults our entire life for our parents, for Arista. In 2012, my father came to me and my brother Ben and said, "Hey guys, I'm ready to step away from kind of day-to-day running of the business," which set up the scenario for Ben and I to purchase the business from my parents, which was great. It really, that moment allowed us to begin to, I think, become the brand that we are today with the winemaking team, the focus, our winemaking philosophy. But all along, my parents owned the piece of dirt that Arista sits on. To anybody that is listening, watching, have visited Healdsburg before, West Side Road is an iconic road. It is, books, movies have been made about it. It's about 10 minutes from where we're sitting. Rocchioli, William Selliam, Gary Farrell, Davis Bynum, Kistler, Bacigalupi, Porter Creek. Yeah, you can go on. Iconic brands. And so we owned the 36 acres of land immediately between William Selliam and Rocchioli.
Oh, my.
From 2002 up until this year. My dad was turning 80 this year, and he came to us a couple years ago and just said, guys, it's time for us to begin to simplify our life, downsize. I have other siblings that live on the East Coast. My parents just don't get to see them as often as they'd like to. And so they said, hey, at 80, it's time for us to simplify our life. And so my brother Ben and I, we got some advisors together and really kind of looked at, did it make sense for us to buy this significant estate? It's super important piece of land, super important to the history of our brand, super important as just a physical location. But the reality of it is, at 6,000 cases of wine, if we're trying to run a business, even if my parents and they would have given us a bit of a break on the price, what it was going to do in terms of long-term debt and how we were going to have to restructure our business to grow, to be able to kind of fund a purchase like that. Yeah. As crazy as it sounds, after months of working with some consultants, we just realized it wasn't what our brand needed to do. And so as a family, we looked at, man, if we sold this, what would it do for the long-term history viability of Arista as a business? And so my parents made the decision to sell that estate. And so, yeah, certainly from the outside, it could maybe sound a little confusing, but we sold that piece of land. We no longer own it. But we continue to make our wine in that building. So it's the same winemaking team. We're now a client in the building that we built. We just get to be very small and very focused now on just making wine. And so a significant change like this for us, where you sell what was kind of the ancestral spiritual home of this brand, on one hand, I mean, it's a big thing. On the other hand, it really sincerely sets us up, I believe, for kind of the coming years of this industry, being asset light, being nimble, being flexible, kind of take some chips off the table and really be in a kind of a strategic position right now. Sure. It really frees us up, to be completely honest, to maybe begin to tackle new consumers and new demographics that we didn't have to. We had such this wonderful spot. It was so beautiful, such high traffic and volume, and anybody would want to have that. But honestly, in a sense, it's not that it allowed complacency, but you just kind of, there was so much volume on that road that, and that's what you paid for to get that. Now we don't have that. So now it's really an opportunity to begin to kind of use new technologies, new platforms to begin to communicate with new consumers, while getting to continue to make these wines at a super high level. We just don't have the noise, I guess, of high traffic, hospitality.
Sure. Any wine lover who has not been to Alexandra Valley is cheating themselves, because it's just an incredible place to go and very peaceful.
It's a magical, serene spot. Yep.
And for our listeners who like to learn about you online, what is your website?
aristawinery.com. I'll tease it with, we have a new website forthcoming. So check back. But Arista Winery, Arista, aristawinery.com.
Excellent. Mark, thanks for taking the time today. I know you got to fly here shortly, literally. Yeah. And this has been a lot of fun talking with you.
Ray, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming and visiting and getting to know and sharing your platform with me so that we can get our family story out there. Thank you.